The old is leaving to make way for the new. Decay is coming, you know, that's just like him. A 34-year-old guy beating up an 18-year-old kid is always going to be news. It's always going to be a big deal. He keeps coming back. He's like Jason. Neymar is Jason, man. That whole soccer code of yours, like you can't do a little flick over an opponent's head during a game. That's humiliation, etc. There's systemic sexism in all of this, right? A big part of it is systemic sexism, right? It's part of society, and even more so in soccer. You have more obligations, you know? When you become a role model, when you become an idol, you have some obligations, right, man? It's because of Neymar's performance. Neymar hasn't played for years, man. He just can't.
Lucio, what did you think about Shakira coming to Rio de Janeiro?
Is that really the topic of conversation? Man, is this a prank?
Lucio, we're following all this mess that's still under investigation about Santos's training, where Robinho Jr. and Neymar supposedly got into a fight and Neymar allegedly assaulted Robinho's son, Robinho Jr. And based on that, I ask you, does the current Neymar go against the Neymar that made him a star?
What the hell? Are we really going to talk about Neymar? Is that it? Again, once more, we keep talking about him and he keeps coming back. He's like Jason. Neymar is like Jason, man. He never leaves the headlines. Is that right, Joel? We're really going to talk about Shakira, man. I'm kidding. The fact is, Neymar is news. There's something new going on. I think actually there's something big and new coming up. Not that Robinho Jr. is going to be the next Neymar. So far, he hasn't shown any signs of that. But there's this thing about the structured, established order breaking down a bit, right, man? Someone shows up to question that order, whether it's with a dribble or with... And Neymar, at this point in his career, I think anything scares him. So I think everything that happened is pretty much because of that, right, man? Like the guy was all powerful there, especially in that Santos universe and so on. Feeling questioned, challenged by a kid, right?
By changing his attitude, Lucio, is Neymar creating an implicit hierarchy about who can play with irreverence?
It's unbelievable, this contradiction, right, man? Because Neymar was the picture of irreverence, right, man? When he first appeared, his style of play challenged all that order, challenged the football world's pecking order. He was the irreverent one. Then suddenly this guy, it's like that song by Elis Regina, right, man? Like our parents, right, man? Suddenly this guy finds himself repeating everything the others did, right? That guy whose soccer in a way was a challenge to all that established order. This guy questioning that, this guy taking that attitude, right?
When irreverence turns into disrespect. And who defines that line?
That's something, it's a complicated debate because I think there's a lot of moralism in it, right? About irreverence turning into disrespect. We see that a lot on the field, right? That unwritten soccer code doesn't allow certain things. I think the limit is always the law. In this case, the rules of soccer. If you don't break the rules of soccer, you're within that limit. Otherwise, it becomes something very subjective, right? I set one limit, you set another. So the limit is the laws of the game, you know? You know, it's very much like this unwritten soccer code, like, oh, you can't do a little chip over a defender during the game, that's humiliation, etc. And then the guy runs and goes after the other, you know? The limit is the law, man. The law allows the chip over a defender. The law allows that. Okay, there's no limit. You can do it. The guy can even stand on the ball like Memphis did, etc. I think that there, the law, in a way of the game, treats that, you know, as unsportsmanlike conduct, etc. I think that's crossing a line. Who am I? Imagine at this point in life pretending to be a moralist. But I have no doubt that in this case, what should determine things is the limit of the law. The law allows the little chip over a defender. The law allows the nutmeg. The law allows, you know. Zeta Silva, who plays I don't know where or for Flamengo or wherever, can't be the one to decide. What's the rule? What can and can't be done? There's a referee and he has to decide. This is allowed, this isn't.
But does this really exist, Lucio? This unspoken hierarchy, this code of ethics in football?
It does. It exists in life and I think in football too. Because it's a more concentrated piece of life, it's even stronger there. But behind all that, I think we can't lose sight of what's really behind it, what's at the core of all this. I think we can't ignore that there's systemic sexism in all of this, right? A big part of it is systemic sexism, right? It's in society and in football. But still, and it's amazing how football just can't break certain patterns, right? Even beyond football, the stands have already made some changes, right? You see the stands, for example, the older folks with white hair will remember, you used to go to a stadium, it was a space women were barred from. When a woman entered the stands, people would shout, "Slut, slut." And that changed. Times have changed, you know. Time doesn't allow certain things anymore. However, in football on the field, they still push it too far, you know. This thing about throwing your weight around, about showing who's boss. I understand that the game has its specifics, right, man? Obviously, at certain moments, you have to show something. Nobody ignores that. Otherwise, you get that crowd that says, "Oh, you've never kicked a ball, you don't know what this is." Obviously, the game has some specifics compared to life, but there's a limit, man. There are limits of basic decency, limits of basic civility, you know? And this systemic sexism in soccer, which is even more entrenched than in society, which is already too much, right? And this thing doesn't change. That's really impressive. I think we can't lose sight of the core of this whole story, which is immense systemic sexism.
Can I use an example? Does Neymar lose the right to be inconsistent with his own story?
I think you have more responsibilities, right, man? When you become a role model, when you become an idol, you have some responsibilities, right, man? First with yourself, right, man? This guy, man, symbolized, what's his song again? Alegria e ousadia. That's it. Where's alegria e ousadia? So the guy became the opposite of himself, of what his own song stood for.
Does this change in attitude indicate difficulty in dealing with the rise of new stars?
It indicates absolute difficulty in dealing with new stars. It indicates that the old is stepping aside to make way for the new. His decline is coming, you know? That's just like him. It indicates a major conflict at a time when we're 2 weeks away from a call-up, and with this crisis he's in, he probably won't get called up. And I think that says a lot, right, about what's going on in that whirlwind in that head of his, which was never really that good, right?
Alegria, do you think this Neymar Robinho Jr. case was overhyped by the media and should have been handled internally, or is it getting the right amount of attention?
Well, then we're getting into another level, which is the news itself, right? Here's what I think. A 34-year-old guy attacking an 18-year-old kid is always going to be news. It's always going to be a big deal. There's another side to this which we still don't really understand, which is Robinho's agents sending the formal notice. There's a whole story there, but it doesn't change the fact that a 34-year-old guy can't just slap an 18-year-old kid, okay? That's not up for debate. Now, there's this angle involving the agents behind that formal notice. We're going to have to understand what's behind it. If there's some opportunism in wanting to take advantage of a situation that in a way is actually common in the world of soccer, not that it's right, but it is common. And then there's this unprecedented move of sending a formal notice if what you want is to leave for free to make things easier. There's a lot of context here. I don't know who their agents are, but we'll have to figure it out.
An episode like this, isolated, at least when it comes to the aggression, right? Does it really carry enough weight to affect a World Cup call-up? Or do you think that performance on the field is still the decisive factor for Ancelotti?
Both, I think. His on-field performance was already far below expectations. And then people cling to something like this, something so silly in this moment of polarization in Brazil. Oh, they have this opinion because of their political stance. There's that, which is nonsense. It's even unfair for someone to judge or think that. We're analyzing his performance on the field. If it were about political stance, for example, and I'm talking about mine specifically, when someone implies that, I would defend calling up Richardson, who has always shown himself to be a progressive guy, etc. And I don't defend him because of that. I don't think Richardson deserves it. There are 10 players ahead of Richardson, even though I admire his soccer and his achievements. So obviously that's not the reason. It's about Neymar's performance. Neymar hasn't played in years, man. He can't do it. I saw the statistics. I can't remember them now, but I'm terrible with numbers, right? But I think, I don't know, in 3 years it's been 50 games, man. And like, he can't do it. You see in physical battles with stronger opponents, he just can't do it anymore, man. It can happen. So on the field, he's not an automatic pick anymore. Now, if there was any doubt that on the field, even without him being at his peak, it was worth taking this guy because of what he represents to the group, because of the example he sets for the young players, that ended yesterday, right? If by any chance someone defended, or in Ancelotti's mind, which I don't think was the case, but let's suppose that, and we see some shady influencers and we know why, making this defense of him, etc., arguing that he's good at motivating the group, etc. If that exists, that's over now. I think that above all, Neymar has this big problem that we've talked about here, in a way, right, man? It's Peter Pan syndrome, right, man? A guy who refused to grow up, and that's really reinforced by living in a bubble, right, man? The guy lives in a bubble, and his bubble has a name, right? I've rarely seen a bubble have a name. It's his crew. The guy is surrounded by his crew, his dad protecting him. So the outside world never really affected him much, you know? So this guy has never had to face any real contradiction. Someone has a friend to say, don't do that. So this really affected Neymar's story. I'm going to hand it over to Lúcio de Papo. If it's Neymar again next week, don't call me. I won't come, okay?